So I'm sure that everybody has seen how quickly disasters can happen. And this isn't only disasters like fire or health and safety disasters, but it's a range of different things that can have a severe impact on buildings and on collections. And so this is really an important aspect of the work that we do. It's really a critically important aspect. And so that's why we had a session on the risk assessment and evaluation, and there was an assignment for that. And now this one that we're looking at is for the risk mitigation or risk management. So once you've identified your risks, then what do you actually do about it? So that's, you know, just identifying them is one thing, but unless you have a plan to address them, then it's a bit pointless to really have done the assessment. So this assignment was really a continuation of assignment 3. So it's the same spreadsheet that we're going to be looking at. I'm just going to share my screen and sorry, go back to the start of it. All right, so it's the tutorial for assignment 4. And what you needed to do for this assignment, or what you still need to do if you haven't started yet, is from your risk assessment and evaluation that you did for assignment 3, you have to select the very highest risk. So they can either be catastrophic or extreme or high. So anything from above 9.5, the score, or risk score. So you don't have to do all of them. You might have quite a lot. So you can pick the top 3 to 5. So if you feel that you want to put in more effort, you can do 5. Otherwise, you can pick a minimum of 3. And now you're going to do a risk treatment, risk management, risk mitigation, whatever you want to call it. You're going to do a plan for that. So here you're also looking at the layer of enclosure and the different stages, and you're going to select the best option that you come up with, and you're going to develop an implementation plan for it. So there's also different steps in this assignment. And again, we said that it would be better as a group assignment, but if you're on your own, then it's fine. You might have to just ask around or ask people from other institutions. And there is a template that you can use. And we'll look at things like the costing. You might not know how much things cost. It's just an estimate for the assignment. Obviously, if you're doing this properly for your manual implementation, you'll have to do it a little bit more thoroughly. So just to go back, we've done this in assignment and webinar 3, the context, identifying the risks, analyzing them, evaluating them. And so this last assignment, assignment 4, is now about treating the risk and about monitoring it. So just to go back for people who weren't here this morning, just to refresh your mind, there's 10 agents of deterioration, and you need to consider all of them. So physical forces, disassociation, humidity, temperature, light, pollutants, pests, water, fire, and criminals. So those things should be very well known to you by this stage. And then you have to think about those at the 6 layers of enclosure, and this should also now be very familiar. So the containers or the support, the fittings, so the cabinets or shelving, the room, the building, the site, and the region. So there's all these layers of enclosure for an object. And then we had these 3 different types of risk. So it can either be rare, so it will hardly ever happen. When it happens, it could be severe, but it doesn't happen often. It can be something that's common, it happens often, or it can be something that's cumulative. So it's not an event, it just happens continuously or intermittently over time. And then we said that you have to analyze the risks, and it looks at 3 different things. So once it's about the frequency and the time it takes, but also how much impact on an individual specimen or object and on the collection. So there's, you do the scoring, and you can come up with this kind of, we didn't ask you to do this, but this is the kind of graph that if you plotted it, you would be focusing on risks that happen a lot or happen very fast, and that would result in almost total loss of value, either total loss or almost total loss of value to your collection, so the destruction of the collection. So we said the magnitude of risk, you have to do this calculation. That's assignment 3, A, B, C. Adding those up, you come up with your scores. And then, you know, if something's 13.5 to 15, it means it's a catastrophic thing that will happen. You'll lose your whole collection. Or it can be extreme, so that's 11.5 to 13, or it can be high. And you can probably live with the medium and low priority risks. But you have to do something about catastrophic risks or extreme risks. You have to, you can't know they're there and not do anything. And even high risks, you should do something about them, not just live with them. So that's just the background. That's where we come from assignment 3 or topic 3 or risk assessment and analysis. Now risk mitigation. So what do you do? And again, this is a very systematic approach. It means that you think through each risk in a very step-by-step way, and not just sit and randomly think. So we use the 6 layers of enclosure at a start and think about how you can intervene at each level to remove or reduce the risk. So you need to know at what level is that risk, and then how can I intervene? And you may be able to intervene at more than one layer, or it might just be that you can only intervene at one layer. And then you need to think about the stages of control. So there's 5 stages of control. We're not going to worry about the last one. So you can avoid the cause of the risk. So this is the best thing to do, but it's not always feasible. So how do you make sure it doesn't happen? You just avoid it. Or you can block. So you can put up some kind of a barrier between the object and the source of deterioration. So you're not avoiding it, but you're blocking it. You can detect, so that's your monitoring, and then you can respond when the monitoring indicates that there's a problem. So you also need to think of your interventions in terms of these different stages of control. So there's a table that you complete, and it combines the layers of enclosure and those stages of control. So you can see you have a region, site, building, collection room, fittings, and your support or your containers for your specimens. And you think about avoiding, blocking, detecting, responding, and recovering. So for this assignment, and if you're implementing the manual, this table has to be done for each of the risks that you aim to remove or mitigate. And so for your assignment, you're going to have 3 to 5 of these tables, one for each of the top scoring risks. And you don't populate every single cell in the table. Sometimes you will just have 2 or 3, and we'll look at some examples. But what you need to do is to put all the possible options that can be included. So you don't just pick one, you think through it very carefully and think, what are all the possible things I could do? And let me put them all down. And then afterwards you analyze them. So it can be difficult. You might have no idea how to remove or reduce the risks. And so what we suggested is that you can go back to the manual, look at chapter 4, look at chapter 7. There are recommendations for how to address risks. And it's really about meeting accepted standards and following procedures. So it may be that your mitigation might be to develop a policy and implement that policy. Might be about developing SOPs and implementing those SOPs. So yeah, so if you're stuck, go back to the manual. All right, so for the assignment, you will have listed, so I did that example for assignment 3 where I did my big spreadsheet. I pretended it was a collection of millipedes, Diplopoda, and I did my scoring, and these were the top risks. So those that scored 12 and above, so they're quite severe risks. So I put them all down, and then I picked 3 to 5 of them that were really the most serious. So there were the lids that kept popping off the poly tops, those little vials, those plastic lids pop out, and my ethanol was drying out. I had problems with my plastic bottles for the bigger specimens. Those bottles were drying and cracking, and the specimens were drying out. That hypothetical collection is in the middle of Joburg, and so there's looting, riots, vandalism. There's fire. Everyone's going to have a fire risk. That's why I didn't flag that one. And then also specimens left out of the cabinets and where they're exposed to sunlight, and then ongoing change in temperature because our air conditioners don't work properly. They're always breaking. And then I also said that loss of staff to regularly check, monitor, and correct levels of ethanol was a big risk. And then the labels had got lost or mixed up, and it could keep happening during data capture or GRAP 103. So this is a big risk. This is this disassociation where your information can get lost. So your critical information, like on your label, gets separated from the specimen. Or your numbers and things have got all jumbled up during data capture. So loss of staff is also under that disassociation. Okay, so this is, you would do your table, plastic bottles drying, cracking, and losing ethanol. Now I'd have to think about, well, what can I do about it? Is there anything in the region I can do? Well, no. Site, no. Building, no, not really. Collection room, cabinets and shelves, no. My problem, the risk here is sitting at the level of the packaging and the container. It doesn't matter if I did anything to the shelves or cabinets or the collection room, there would still be loss of ethanol if the bottles cracked and the lids popped, lost their seal. So you've got to think about at what level. And here it's just about fixing those containers. And these are the options. I can replace all my plastic bottles with glass bottles with good quality lids. I could put a piece of plastic film under the lid and put them on, and that might seal them better. And if the lid cracks, it won't lose ethanol so quickly. I can do regular checks of my bottles and ethanol levels so that I pick up where there's a problem as quickly as possible. And then if I pick up that problem, I can replace the broken, cracked bottle and lids with a new plastic bottle. So you can see there's how these fit in. So there's a void. A void is just remove that problem, and that's putting new glass bottles. Blocking is putting a barrier between the risk and the agent of deterioration. Detecting is monitoring, so that's regular checks. And responding is replacing the bottles with plastic bottles, but at least I'll do something, I'll intervene. Then there's the same table, and you do it for another one of your risks. And so this is the risk about the incorrect temperature because of my air conditioners that are always breaking, and then I'll wait 3 months for someone to come service them, and they fix them, and within a month they're broken again. So what can I do? And here you can see there's nothing you can do at the level of the containers of the specimens. There's nothing you can do at the level of the cabinets or shelves. I mean, maybe putting them into cupboards would help a bit, but your interventions are really going to have to be in your storeroom, maybe something in the building, your site, unless you move the collection to a different region. That might be one that we could put in there. So avoid would be to move the collection to a place where it's not so hot. But most of your interventions are here at the level of the collection room. So these are the things you can do. You can repair those air conditioning units again and again and again, but maybe they're old, maybe the parts are no longer available. You can get new air conditioning units, so you just take out all those old ones and you put in new ones. You could install insulation in the roof of the building, so that would be blocking, that's putting a barrier between the heat and your collection. You could put blockout blinds on all the windows so you get no sunlight in, so that's also blocking, but it's at the level of your collection room. Detect, you can monitor your temperature. That is an intervention, but it's not going to solve the problem, but it is something at that action of detect. And then respond. So if you pick up that your temperatures are going up too much or there's too much fluctuation, your response should be servicing of the air conditioner or repairs once you reach a level of unacceptable fluctuations. So you can see for this, it's mostly at the collection room, and there is something you can do at all the different levels. So you think of everything you could do. This one is an interesting one. What would we do if we just don't have staff? And I think this is a very common issue at a lot of the institutions. So you can say we've lost our staff, or we've only got one person to manage all these collections. And if they go, then there's nothing. And that's for checking, monitoring, and adjusting levels of ethanol. So it's difficult. What kind of mitigation or solution do you put in place? Can you try and prevent the loss of staff? Is that realistic? So you can't, if somebody's going to be retiring, you can't stop them. If somebody's got a better job or moving to another province, you can't really stop them. So it's very difficult to prevent the loss of staff. You can try and make a good working environment, and that might be something that you can put in here. It might be, I don't know where you'd actually put it, but you could put it in terms of your building. Have you got a nice, happy building with a nice tea room where everyone can gather and drink tea together and chat? But is it realistic that you can really stop the loss of staff? Or should we rather try and mitigate the impact of the loss of staff? So now you're not thinking just about the staff, but you're thinking about what those staff do and intervening at the, to deal with the levels of ethanol, checking and monitoring. Maybe you can put something in place there, but maybe you can put both approaches in. So put down all your options here, but this is a difficult one to actually resolve. So let's maybe just pause here and hear if anybody's got any suggestions. This is something that I think several of you will come up with as a risk, and what are you going to do about the mitigation? It can be a risk to test, monitoring and control, to any kind of care for the collection, relabeling, databasing, anything. So if you don't have staff, there are various risks. Any suggestions for solutions to this problem, this risk? Eunice, do you want to go?
Oh yes, good afternoon, everyone. I also have the risk that is only one staff doing everything. So
can you imagine, Eunice, if you leave, or if you had to leave, what would happen to that collection? Yeah, I don't know what the solution is, but you have to think about this for your risk assessment. Let me see, I'm going to ask somebody else. So the fossil people, maybe you're quite lucky, and Bernard might have an argument against what I'm saying, but if you just close the door on your fossils, would there really be a big risk to them?
It's a good question, Michelle. You're right. Most of them aren't going to go anywhere. We do have, comparative extant collections that could theoretically get into a worse state, but on the whole, it's not a huge risk.
So if you had a clean room that was well sealed, and you could just basically close the door, the collection.
It'll be fine, if it's 300 million years old, an extra few years won't make a difference. But you brought up an important point. I mean, in our case, as you know, lately, we have lots of uncatalogued collections. Would that be considered a risk to the collection?
Yeah, it is, because it's that disassociation. So basically, if it's uncatalogued, there's no record of it. And that has consequences for other things. It's not serving its purpose of being accessible. There may be loss of information because it hasn't been documented properly.
Right.
And so there, if you don't have the capacity, to do that work, that's a risk to the collection.
Right. Yeah.
Your existing capacity, and then you've got to try and put in place some kind of mitigation.
Right.
Let's hear from Lee, because they've had some staff leaving recently. I'd be interested to know what happens with the collections when staff leave.
Well, things continue. We've got a fantastic volunteer component, and we are supported by the municipality in that they have a graduate learnership program. So yeah, I mean, currently with our ornithology department, we have an intern running the department, but implementing all the documentation, all of that, so that everyone is now standardized and working with our technical assistant. So things still continue.
Yeah, thanks. So I mean, that is one option, but it may not be an option for everybody. But I think that from what you said, there's something quite it might be that if you have no staff, you have to have a thing in place. I mean, your priority is to make sure that the collection doesn't deteriorate. And so that might be the thing to do first, to prioritize just a basic maintenance program. And you obviously can't do the cataloging like Bernard was talking about. You can't send out loans or receive visitors, but your first priority would be to make sure that that collection is safe and to come up with a basic plan just to secure the collection, whatever that might require. But that would be your kind of a plan that would have to be documented and developed, and you'd have to see how just that could be implemented. So yeah, it's a challenging one to think about, but I think a very realistic risk to a lot of our collections. Anybody else want to add here? Nothing? All right, let's continue.
Oh.
Eunice, go.
Yeah, I want to ask, what are the risks of like the ants? What should be the mitigations for the ants and
For what? Ants.
yes, ants coming into the collections and
Yeah, so then you've got a pest problem. And, you know, in some collections, it wouldn't really be a huge issue. So, for example, the fossil collections, you can't see ants doing too much damage. If you've got an ethanol collection, it's just all ethanol. Having ants isn't going to be a big problem. But if you've got pinned insects, if you've got skins or anything that can be eaten, I don't think ants would, well, I suppose it would depend on which ants. I don't know if any of our ant specialists are here today. So, but you need to put in place, so it would probably be a low priority risk, but you would have to put ant traps out or have a fumigation done or see where they're coming in and block that, that hole. That should be in your assessment if you think it's a risk, but it might come out as a low risk. What proportion of the collection would be affected and how badly damaged would the individual specimens be? Okay, so once you've identified all the options available, so you do it for your 3 or your 5 risks and you put all your options there, then you're going to select the best option. And it might be more than one. But you go through this process of thinking what would be the, what would be the best, how much of the risk would be reduced if I did this. Does it eliminate the risk completely or just reduce most of it or just bring about a small risk reduction? So what we really want to do is to find the options that reduce most, if not all, of each priority risk. So, I mean, I've seen it quite often where people implement the wrong solution to the problem and can put a lot of energy into doing something that's only going to have a small impact. So that's why this is a really important step in your mitigation, your risk management plan. But you also have to think about how much does it cost to implement that option. So once you're focusing on an option, you say, how much would this cost? And think about, it might not just be about buying something. There may be a maintenance cost that's ongoing forever. There might be electricity costs to run something. And you also need to think about staff time as being a cost, because staff time is money. And so something might be good, but your staff would spend all their time doing that and nothing else would get done. So you've got to think about the options in terms of all of these different things. You can also think about, is it a really impactful solution or more than one thing? And then you've got to think about, is it feasible? But does it conflict with other options? Does it create new risks if you do it? So if you install new air conditioners, you might have increased risk of electrical faults that increases your fire risk. You might increase the risk of leaking, water leaking. I know I had new air cons put in the lab, and within, it was 6 months, they were streaming water down onto the floor. So if there'd been a wet collection in there, my solution for temperature control would have created another risk. And then think about the long-term sustainability and the staff capacity. So sometimes you can come up with the money to buy something and it'll be a good solution, but have you got the capacity to develop the specifications for it, and your SCM, have they got the capacity to actually procure it through government systems? So you've got to think about capacity, and that can be a challenge. So this is an example. So this is the one for the temperature control. We've got temperature fluctuation. I put all my options down here. And then I think about how much would it reduce the risk by. And sometimes you've just got to use common sense, or just think about it from your experience. So yes, we can put insulation, a thick layer of that, whatever that stuff is, aerolite or whatever. You put it in the ceiling, and it will protect you, but it'll reduce the risk of temperature fluctuations by about 30%. We have to do the whole building, not just my collection storeroom, and it's expensive, about 800,000. So it will help, but it won't remove the problem. Repairing existing air conditioning units, I've put naught because the people have told me that these things are now 30 years old. You can't get the parts to repair them. Not an option. I just take it off the table. If I put in new air conditioning units of the right kind, I can remove this risk completely. It'll avoid it, and it'll cost me 600,000 Rand. I can also put block-out blinds. They're cheap. They're 80,000 Rand. I can do that just in the room where the specimens are. But it's not going to solve the problem. It'll reduce it. So it'll be about a 20% reduction. Monitoring the temperature in the collection storeroom, it on its own is not going to solve this, but it'll help me as an action to manage this risk. And they're cheap. I'm on a temperature logger, 8,000 Rand, but there's a staff time cost. You know, somebody has to do the analysis and keep an eye on it. And then my responding action is to service the air conditioners or have repairs once you pick up in your monitoring your unacceptable fluctuations. And that will reduce the risk a lot. If I keep those air conditioners working, sometimes they'll be down. That's why I said 50%. Won't completely remove it on its own, but it'll help. And that is an annual cost. So it's an ongoing cost, 12,000 Rand a year for my servicing contract. You put all of that down, and then you select. You can think about which one you would pick. Here's the one for my plastic bottles that keep breaking. I list all my options there. Replacing them with glass bottles with good quality lids is going to reduce the risk by 90%. It's going to cost me 460,000, and there's a big staff time to move all of those specimens, rebottle them. But it's more or less a once-off. It's not, once you've moved them into the new bottles, it's done. Inserting plastic film lids inside the lids, there'll be some reduction, but it'll be small. It'll be cheap, but it'll also have a staff time. Imagine sitting there putting that in 16,000 bottles. Regular checks of bottles and ethanol levels. So this is really important. It won't remove the risk entirely, but you would reduce it a lot if you left your plastic bottles and you just did this. But there's a staff time ongoing. Every week somebody's got to do an inspection. And you're also going to be losing ethanol, so there's a cost. And if we just replace the cracked, broken plastic bottles with more plastic bottles, it's cheap. There's a big staff time. And you'll reduce it, but you won't remove the risk, because sometimes bottles crack or the lids crack, and it happened when you were, there was 2 weeks before you did an inspection. So there's still that risk. But anyway, this is what you do. You go through everything and you pick the best one. So here, I think I would definitely replace my air conditioning units. But I'd also put blinds in because it puts less strain on the units. If you have your light blocked and your sunlight blocked. And I would also have to monitor my temperature. That just is good practice, and it's part of that detecting. And of course, I have to service my aircon. So there, I'm actually going to pick 4 and do them all. For this one, I think the only option for me is to replace all the bottles with glass bottles, and I'll still have to do checks. Everybody has to do checks of levels, but it'll be much less staff time because you won't have to do it as frequently. I would pick those 2. And then the last part of this assignment is to do your implementation plan. So what steps, what actions are needed, who will do it, how long will it take, and what will you need? So this is an example. I've decided to put in my new air conditioners. I have to say step 1 is this, step 2 is that, step 3 is that. So I have to first make sure with everyone that there's budget, get it into the institutional budget. And I do that, but I'll have to speak to my boss, and I also have to speak to finance. And then we have to develop the specifications, so how big, how powerful, how many. I don't know, I've actually done specifications for air conditioners. You learn a lot by looking on the internet, by asking people. And then it has to go into the procurement plan, and then there has to be a whole tender process. And I work with SEM for that. And then once we select the service provider, they come and do the installation. And so for each of your options, each of your actions, you need this implementation plan. So I think that that's it for the presentation. I'm just going to go through the spreadsheet. Let's have a look here. So this is the, if you're not sure about anything, go to the NSCF website. Fulu's done an amazing job of getting everything up there. And you can easily click on the templates and you can download it. You just go to File and Download. Let's just do that. You can download it as an Excel spreadsheet. So you'll submit one spreadsheet for assignment 3 and 4. You'll have done all your background, you'll have done your risk identification and analysis. And I think this is where the confusion came, the questions that Mashiani was asking this morning. So if you go to assignment 3 and you click on the template, it's a bit different to this. So if you want to use that one, you're very welcome to do it. To use that one. All right, so this is what you're going to populate. So this is your table for each of the 3. You could have 5, and then you're going to have your plan. Let me see. Okay, so who's done this? I think some of you have uploaded it to the Google Drive and we can look at it. Okay, so Audrey asked chapter 4. Oh, chapter 4 is the data management. Sorry, it's not chapter 4, Audrey. It'll be chapter, the collection care. Is that chapter 5, hey? Audrey?
Yes, the collection care is chapter 5, but you were referring to chapter 7, where they could find more information for assignment 4.
Yeah. So it's also a chapter, it's not chapter 4, it's chapter 5. So if you want to see what the standard should be, go to chapter 5 for caring for the collections and what kind of bottles and what kind of shelving and what kind of humidity levels and what kind of temperature levels. It's all in chapter 5. It's not chapter 4. Thanks, Audrey. And then chapter 7 also has some things about your fire control, so disaster events. All right, so should we look at some examples? Let's see. So is Rendani and Simone, did you work on this together again? So, you know, I mean, if you think about doing this for all your risks, for all your collections, it's a huge exercise to do this properly, to cover everything. And, you know, institutions can take months to do this whole thing for their collections properly. And all of this feeds into their planning, their budgeting and their planning. And so it's how you actually remove the risks, but it's not simple. All right, so I've got Rendani and Lutada and Prudence, Sifiso, Tanya, and Simone. This is their effort at UKZN. And we looked at their thing and they did their risk assessment for assignment 3, and then let's have a look. So they've got their risk. There's fire, water, incorrect temperature. They picked those 3 to do. And then the building, so how can you avoid? That's good. Say no smoking inside the building. You can block by putting a fire door. You can detect, so putting in a fire alarm and smoke detectors. And your response, their response will be run, get out, evacuate the building. But it might be that you have some kind of a fire suppression. You might have it linked, your smoke detectors linked to the fire station, so at least they come quickly. Whether it will be in time, I don't know, but anyway. In your collection room, they've put again rules, policies to avoid. You can't have heaters, you can't have faulty extension cords. To block, you're going to put in your fire resistance cabinets, metal cabinets. And then in the collection room, you're also going to have your smoke detectors and fire alarm. And your response, they actually would try and put out they're not just going to run. They're going to try and sort out the fire. And then their cabinets, they've got, you know, don't put electrical plugs above the cabinets. You can use fireproof paint for your metal cabinets, and then you can also try and fight it. And you're going to use, so for fire, I'm not sure that your cardboard, I don't know if there's any way of actually dealing with it. So I think acid-free will still, it'll protect them from something else, but not from fire. Okay, so I think that's good. And then they've done it for their water. And they have flooding, checking, detecting. So you guys have definitely got the right approach here, and you've obviously understood what to do. Let's have a look. You've selected the best options. So what you need to do for fire is to put all your options down here in a long list. So go back to that previous list and put all those options, all of them, for whatever level. You've got to take them from there and put them here. So this, I think you've put, I don't think you've put all of them here. You only have to do it for one, that's right. So you've picked fire, but go back to your options for mitigating the risk. You'll take all of the things that you've put here And then you'll put them in a list here. And some of them you might need to reword a little bit, but you'll do your assessments on all of those things that you identified for fire. Is that clear what needs to be done? That you're going to carry your, for this table, for selecting the best option, you have to bring your options from your previous table. And then your implementation plan, installation of a fire suppression system. So you only have to pick one, your best option, and you're going to hand it over to the technical manager. And that might be fine for some of these. You're not going to do it yourself. You're going to just say to the technical manager, we need installation of a fire suppression system. Please, will you do it? But sometimes you might have multiple steps. All right. Let's see if there's chat. It's on, okay, so Rendani said it's on the same spreadsheet as assignment 3. You worked in a group, right? Yes, we've seen your work. Okay. Let's have a look at somebody else's. Let me go back. Stop sharing. Maybe I can actually. The ARC people. Yeah, I guess this would be, it's Andrea and Kirsten. Are either of them here? Okay, so let's just see. So they haven't used the template here. I just want to see. There's their templates, and they've picked the top scoring one. I'm not quite sure how they've done it. Okay, yeah, all right. So catastrophic, so they've also done fire, and they've used the table here. So avoiding, they can maintain fire breaks around the campus. Good, so that's a good avoidance thing. Removing the trees from around the building, that's a good avoidance. Limiting the volume of ethanol, again, avoiding. And then having some policy things like no smoking in the collection room, having extraction to remove the buildup of ethanol fumes. Okay, so this looks good. Locking. So each cabinet will have fire-resistant cladding. Good, and the floorboards are made of steel and heavy-duty vinyl floor tiles. So they're blocking, they're putting in place a barrier between the fire at the level of the cabinets, and then use non-flammable containers. I don't know, I suppose glass, but it could explode. Okay, so they've put in place all of that, and then detecting the best option. So fire, got their steps there. 80%. I just want to see. So it's a little bit more confusing because they haven't just used the spreadsheets in the table. I think it's easier to use the spreadsheet and the different sheets at the bottom. Okay, so this is where they listed all their options. And then said what percentage it would reduce and what the cost would be, and would they select that option. Okay, so I would recommend using the spreadsheet. But if they've done this work, it might be okay. All right, so let me stop sharing. All right, I hope that it's clearer now how to do this and what to do. It may be difficult to come up with options for some things, like I was saying with the staff, but you're going to have to maybe hurt your head a little bit. All right, so anybody want to ask anything, or Lee?
Oh, sorry, Michelle. I'm obviously terribly behind with assignments since having to taken up the acting position. Category C, so I've just about completed listing all the possible risks. Going back to assignment 3, which follows on to assignment 4. Category C, what is the descriptive for that? Sorry, I don't know why I didn't note it in the previous tutorial.
Okay, so C is the extent of damage to the collection.
Okay.
So B is the individual objects, and C is how much of the collection. So if we had a fire, like a fire went through that collection, all the objects individually would probably be completely lost, and the entire collection would be affected.
Perfect, thank you. All right, I was on the right track.
And it's quite difficult. So like when I was doing my pretend collection of my millipedes in their little bottles, and you think, so if it dried out, what proportion of that specimen would be lost? And it's, there isn't an exact answer. So I said you'd probably lose about 10% of its value. You could lose 80% of its value. So it's an estimate. And how much of the collection would be affected? Well, I probably, if out of every 100 bottles, at least one of them a year will be affected. So it's 1% in 1 year. So it's an estimate.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions on this? No, so it seems like it's clear. I hope that everybody's going to get around to doing their assignments. So remember that we're expecting a draft of all. So there's 6 assignments that you've been given. At the end of this course, you only have to submit 10 out of, it's probably going to be 16. But this is a really important one to do. But you might leave out some of them. So by the end of the month, you should at least have submitted 3. All right. Okay, so if there's nothing further, then I think we can end the session. Thanks again to everybody for joining us, and to the Hub team for setting it up. And we'll see you next week for the last 2 assignment tutorials. All right, let's just see. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks, bye.